Hello, thank you for being with us for this Working with Friends session. I'm Stephan Bender, CEO of Film France, the French National Film Commission. And today we're going to talk about the French tax rebate for international production. And in the second part of this session, we're going to have a case study about the Syndicate, a British series which was just shot in France. Please keep in mind that this session was pre-recorded, but when it will be broadcasted live, we will be behind the Q&A box and we will answer to any question you may have. Without further ado, I leave the floor to my colleague Laurie Ades, who's our tax rebate expert.
Thank you, Stephan. So here we go for the tax rebate for international production presentation. So a quick word about who we are. My name is Laurie Ades. I'm the head of production and tax rebates, and we are the French Film Commission. So we provide free services for all producers who want to shoot or to work in France. We can rely on a network of 32 film commissions all over France, including overseas territories. We also provide expertise for the tax rebate, and we are assessing projects eligibility. So what we do, we are the kind of one-stop shop for you, dear producers. We are providing information about location, regulation, technical facilities, line producer. Basically, we are helping production to work in France. Currently, we are working a lot to help foreign talents and crew to cross the borders, and I can tell you it works. We have some British production which have been shooting, for example, this summer on Guadeloupe Island, and in September and in October, for example, World of War, The Syndicate, and so on. So a quick word about the French situation. France is ready to shoot, as I say, with non-French production. Since May, film permits are once again being issued and shoots are allowed to go ahead. Clear guidelines are available and filmmakers to ensure compliance with the new safety rules. As solid proof, as I was saying, non-French projects are shooting in France, and it's the perfect case for the case study, the Syndicate that you will see later on. So there's two ways of working with France, and today we are talking about the tax rebate for international production. So what is the trip? In brief word, trip is generous. It can go to up to 40%. Is simple. No red tape. You just bring a deal memo, a script, and a first estimate of your budget. Trip is reliable. The PSC, the Production Services Company, collects the trip every year from the French tax services. Trip is fast. You start spending the day you send the application to the CNC. CNC is the French National Center for Cinema. And now you can get around 10% VFX bonus that we will talk about it later on. So what kind of format are eligible to the trip? Basically, all kinds of projects are eligible except documentary and commercial. You have to know that all those projects have to be scripted. So what are the criteria? You have to spend a minimum of 250,000 euros, or if it's not the case, half of your total budget. You have to work with a French PSC. And for live action projects, you need a minimum of 5 days of shooting. Please note that for VFX or post-production, there is no minimum day of shooting required. You have to pass a cultural test, which is very pretty easy to pass. As for example, we're talking about Mission Impossible, The Hunger Games, The Minion, For the VFX projects, we're talking about Blade Runner, American Gods, and so many other projects. Trip is reliable. How to assess the trip? You have to pass by a company that is subject to corporate income tax in France. They act as a production services company, a PSC, for a foreign producer. They receive the trip through their yearly tax return. It can be either an existing company or a subsidiary of the foreign production, or even a special purpose vehicle, SPV. Don't hesitate to take a look to our online PSC database that is available on FIM France website, which we have more than 100 professionals with a huge variety of languages, and they all know how to assess the trip and how to shoot with a non-French production. So trip is fast. In a few words, this is the trip timeline. So first of all, the producer or the PSC make contact with FIM France, and the PSC requests provisional qualification from the CNC. It's a digital process. As I was saying, it's minimal formality, just bring a script, a deal memo, and first budget estimates. So the PSC can start spending, and then the CNC issue a provisional qualification within 3 weeks. Second time, Greenlight project gets the money every year from the French tax authorities through the PSC. And please note that the tax authority may pay the tax rebate before final qualification has been received. So it's very fast. And third part, PSC requests a final qualification from the CNC, maximum 2 years after the last French expense. And the CNC issue the final qualification within 8 weeks. So what is eligible? Basically, salaries, wages of the European writer and actor, plus the social contribution, are eligible, they are capped. Salaries paid for French or European direction and production staff, wages and incidentals, plus social contribution are also eligible, and there is no cap. Expenditures for technical goods and services based in France, including VFX animation, post-production facilities, there is no cap. Renting location and constructing sets are eligible, and there is no cap. Accommodation, catering, travel for all cast and crew are capped. Transport of materials and depreciation expenses are not capped. So trip is generous. How much do you get when your project qualifies? There is a cap for the tax rebate per project. It's about 30 million euro, but it means that you will have had 100 million euro in eligible expenditure. So if you have such a project, you are very welcome. Another thing to notice, if you plan to spend, let's say, 1 million euro in France, but you change your mind and you decide to spend twice more, don't worry and don't hesitate, because you will get more tax rebates. The rule is simple. The more you spend, the more you will get. Last but not least, the big news is that you can now reach 40% on all your eligible spends if you get the 10% VFX bonus. So this is the rule for the 10% VFX bonus. This bonus goes for projects which are VFX intensive projects and the projects who spend more than 2 million euros in eligible VFX related expenses. To summarize, in order to qualify, Your projects must be a live action fiction film. Please note that animation projects don't qualify for the 10% VFX related tax bonus. You have to include a substantial amount of digital visual effects. At least 15% of the total number of shoots, or an average of 1.5 shoots per minute, are subject to digital processing. It's pretty easy to pass. It have to include 2 million euros of eligible expenses related to the digital processing of shoot. And last, you have to pass a test. If the French expenditure is principally related to digital visual effects, the VFX test will be used. If French expenditure is principally related to non-VFX expenditure, you have to pass the live action test, and you have to shoot at least 5 days in France. Please note that green screen filming counts. So more than 300 projects and 25 nationalities have benefited from the trip. Here are a few examples of the diversity of the projects: animation, feature films, series, blockbuster, VFX works. So these two lovely faces are your contact for any requests or guidance you may need. It's Stephan Bender, our CEO in Film France, and Laurie Ades. You may do not hesitate to contact us during the focus session, and thank you very much for your attention.
Let's jump to our case study. We're going to talk about the Syndicate, the BBC series that was just shot in France. We have two prestigious guests with us today. We have Mike Noble and John Bernard. So my first question will be really, really easy. Gentlemen, who are you?
Oh, my name is Mike Noble. I was a line producer on this series of the Syndicate.
My name is John Bernard, and I was a line producer out here in France.
Okay, thank you, Mike and John. Can you tell us how did you decide to shoot in France first?
Well, the scripts call for a very high-end, the storylines, we've got a very high-end storyline where there's a thread that ends up in Monaco, basically. And we needed a company out there that we could trust to handle all our affairs. I was working remotely, so I've never met JB face to face. So we needed a company who could sort of be the eyes and ears and the feet on the ground for us out there, source the locations and make it run as smooth as possible, really.
Perfect. I've heard that you masterfully manage the COVID situation, and it's a very important issue nowadays. To sum up, 80 UK cast and crew, more than 400 extra, and 0 COVID cases. John, maybe can you tell us more about your COVID strategy on and offset and the collaboration with Mike remotely?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, the collaboration was really the essence of it all, because Mike had put together a system in the UK, which I think had been running, what, Mike, 11 weeks, has it?
Yeah.
So, you know, he gave us a very clear brief on how casts would be made up during the day, who was actually in the bubble, which actually exists around a shooting unit. And we were also, you know, by the stage they got down to us here in Monaco, we were in a stage where everybody in the general public was wearing masks. There was a very high level of containment going on in France. Monaco was under an actual curfew. So it was important for us not only to embrace the rules and regulations which have been put in place in France around the way French people were shooting French shows here, but we were actually bringing probably, I think, one of the only, certainly onto mainland France, at that time of the year, we were bringing in a show which had already set up its own systems, which were working. So it was important that we found out how they were making those COVID decisions, who was where, who did what, how the testing was going on, how the sets were prepared, where people were staying, how the food was managed, All of those sort of things have been done. And we incorporated it with what we had to do here. And the amalgamation of both of those was fantastic, because we literally stepped in and carried on something which Mike was the pioneer in setting up.
So you've created a brand new system with two bubbles, no? That's it?
It was just trial and error to start with, to be quite honest with you. We were very planned in the UK. We had a lot of conversations with health and safety and the crew, involving all the HOD crew in all our conversations as to how we're going to run the show. So we had a sort of a contingent on set, outside of set, and then the peripheral crew who basically never went to set, which sometimes included myself. And we got through it. It was just diligence and hard work, and sometimes acting like everybody's dad by telling them to put the mask on, keep the distance, wash your hands, all that kind of stuff. And that continued with the crew in France. I think the English crew who went over there had it in their head, that method of working anyway. So they weren't going to jeopardize that, because they all wanted to come home at some point. But like JB says, they sort of picked it up and just ran with it, the same as we did over here, really.
Okay. Did you have to hire medical staff or more?
In the UK, we had a COVID team, and then that transferred. They weren't the same team that went to France, but the same ethos transferred over to France as well, to Monaco.
Okay.
Certainly here in France, working on the international shows we work on, we always have a bigger medical presence anyway, just by the very essence of the way health and safety is handled on Anglo-Saxon productions. It's a different philosophy, and it's a different approach.
Yeah,
so
but it works as well.
Yeah, and what we did is we just upgraded what we already had in place and used it more bilaterally across the board, really, in order to embrace the COVID world as well. What we also did, we as a company, we had actually realized the importance of testing and the reaction to the testing. It's all very well testing, but you've got to wait 48 hours when you're making movies. That's not a good turnaround. So we'd actually already invested in machines and a system with a local laboratory that we could actually, which we had on one day. One of the actresses turned up and she wasn't feeling well. And of course, the immediate thing is, it's COVID. Let's remove that bit of the equation immediately. We took her down to the laboratory, which is 10 minutes away. And 38 minutes later, we had her result. She was not COVID positive. So then we were able to go down a more normal route. And in fact, we carried on shooting, and the film resumed as usual. So that was important.
Okay, perfect. Talking more about the crew, did you choose to bring a smaller UK crew to facilitate the shooting in France, or can you tell us a bit more about the strategy?
We brought it was quite tricky because it'd been going on so long, because it was stood down prior to COVID. There was a lot more people, so much knowledge of the show. So we brought out 2 first assistant directors, along with the UK directors and the camera team. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a makeup department as well, but everybody else, I think, pretty much was crewed by JB.
Mike's original brief to me saying, I'm bringing everybody with me. So I said, that's absolutely fine. But as we got closer to the time, he seemed to have people dropping off the list. So we looked more seriously also, not only just people, some people couldn't come for various reasons, one of them to do with COVID. And there was also, it just became, it sort of evolved as opposed to just being a simple line, which this is us and this is you. It became much more of a fusion between the 2 units together. And it was... Yeah.
I think as the looming of a second lockdown came, I think people had a slight hesitation about traveling overseas. For whatever that might bring, really. But we did drop a few bombs on JB quite close to the travel period as well, and it was all sorted. But yeah, every day in those final few weeks, like, well, I don't fancy going either. No, I'm not really going to go either. It's like, okay, all right, sorry about this, but yeah, we need to find this, that, and the other.
I thought Mike might actually come over at one stage, but
yeah,
didn't happen.
I was going to offer, but yeah.
So really, everything planned has been successfully fulfilled, no? I've heard that even shooting in an airport in full lockdown. Can we tell us more about the location and everything planned?
Yes, so Nice Airport. I mean, Nice Airport became obviously a very natural location because the very first thing which people saw when they got off the plane when they arrived in the south of France was the airport. So it was an easy to scout, it was an easy thing to set up, it was an easy thing to obviously have there, and the story required that they arrived at Nice before leaving from Nice. So it was a key location. Yes, not only was there COVID in Nice while this went on, but we also had the terrorist attack on the church, which happened a week before we were going to film at the airport. So it was, yes, considered to be a problem, but in actual fact, it worked out to be quite the opposite, because the airport is one of the key locations in terms of the world of terrorism within the country, which gets a maximum amount of security. It also it drove the airport within the confines of COVID and everything else to actually have fewer flights leaving from it and coming to it. And because we were shooting in this world of not being in COVID, it was really difficult for us to be shooting in a big public place with all the general public around in the background all wearing masks. What actually happened is we got full support from the airport, full support from the city hall here in Nice in order to make it all happen. We obviously were not a risk for them in terms of the terrorist aspects of what was going on at the time. And in actual fact, we were able to put our extras and everything in there and do much wider shots and shot far more efficiently and quickly had there been a lot of general public around. So it was one of the easiest shoots in an airport I've ever done in France. And I've done quite a few of them. Yeah.
Let's talk about the TRIP, our tax rebate for international production, who's 30% and up to 40%. Was it a reason to choose France, Mike?
It became apparent that it was going to help us out, because my concern as a line producer, when you hear those words of Monaco, we're going to go film there for, when we extended our shoot from 12 days to nearly 4 weeks in the end, so that cost just escalated. It was pretty scary when you think how much it might cost you, and then you know all the fringes and everything that differ from the UK side of things.
Yeah.
But once we got it wrangled and got the budget back to us and saw actually what effect the trip has on the bottom line that makes it achievable, it's a bit of a weight off. The one concern was I was going to not be able to achieve what we want to achieve visually out there, but it worked like a charm. It's really helped us out.
Yeah, because for the audience, the more than you spend, the more you will get tax rebates. That's the key point. And did it help to hire more French crew, John, to balance?
Well, there's, accounts are accounts and figures are figures. Did the French tax rebate increase as a consequence of us hiring more people in France? Yes, it did. What those cost implications is, it is very important to look at the overall picture, though. I mean, we shot a lot of stuff inside, but then we needed some inside coverage anyway. We were meant to be in the middle of summer in Monaco. And no matter how lucky we were, we still had 3 or 4 days of bad weather. So it was important to have some weather cover, which we brought into France to shoot here, which actually allowed us to shoot those days because we would have been down days otherwise. So it's the overall picture you've got to look at, which means it becomes cost effective or not. It might have cost a little bit more money to maybe use some of the French crew here or bring them down from Paris or whatever we did. But the net result of the way we ended up scheduling and making the 4 weeks work as opposed to a 12-day period work meant that we actually carried on shooting every single day and we maximized all our time and we got the right pictures and we kept going. That became cost effective. Yes.
Can I just say that's quite a big thing for me as well, is it's the liaison between myself and JB on a regular basis about the budget, about, this is what we want to achieve. This is visually what we want to achieve. What's the best way to do it? How can we do it on our budget? So it's the trip is amazing and it is such an incentive, but also that talking to one another on a very regular basis to get the figures to where you need them to be is pretty key as well.
So now let's talk to some figures about location. How many locations? You say 4 weeks of shooting. Can you?
I can't disclose all the locations. You start giving away a little bit of the story, I think, if we start doing
Without revealing the whole story.
You do come to, and also I think it's important whilst, yes, a lot of this is set in Monaco. We were very much in the Riviera. We were in the south of France. Monaco is an important part of it, but there was also quite a lot of shooting which took place in France itself.
Yeah, for the casino, no? Mm.
So there's obviously the casino, Monte Carlo Casino, iconic, fantastic, reassuringly expensive. There was definitely a moment where we were suffering the idea of actually having to find it somewhere else. But again, it's the relationships you build up with people over the years and what have you. I have a great team of people around me, and we have done some great stuff over the years in Monaco. And the SBM, who actually owned the casino, actually gave it to us for free because they felt that the essence of what this program was bringing to Monaco and the show, and also the fact that we were all making this effort to come all the way down there in the middle of COVID and carry on doing and everything else, they kind of made that work. That was a big plus for us. And to go back to locations, so there's casino, there's some hotels, there's some high ones, there's some lower run ones. There's some streets, there's some harbours, there's some boats around, there's the stuff. Yes.
You will say nothing. Okay, I understand. Did you work with Film France and with the local film commission during this shooting?
Well, I have a very strong relationship with Film France, which I think we all know. I'm very lucky to be part of their board of management as well. It's Film France is what makes the film commission thing in here in France work so well, because you can sell an idea, you can sell a concept, but at the end of the day, what you actually have to have is you have to have nuts and bolts, people on the ground who understand that when the problems come in, and they do, the very nature of making films is that we break the rules and we do everything differently. So we are always a problem. And you need that backup, and I'm English, which obviously you can hear from the accent, but I've been in France for a long time, but there's essentially some Frenchness of being in France where you need French help. And so, yes, I do work very closely with Film France, and they helped with getting work permits for us to be down here. We have some other shows going on as a company in France. They've been very, very proactive in visas, work permits, getting access into locations, getting special dispensations for actors to actually come in and shoot in the time of COVID. And giving a lot of COVID advice as well. They channel out the information which is coming through from all the French guilds to people like me, so that we can incorporate them and share them with people like Mike. Yes, important.
Thank you, John. I think for my not last question, but one of the last question, maybe Mike or John, could you share to the audience some of your best anecdotes, shooting anecdotes during this journey in France?
Well, as I wasn't there, the one thing I kept getting sent pictures of the food. So JB, the director of photography, I think the camera team would send me regularly pictures of their lunch, which in all honesty looked absolutely gorgeous. So just every day there'd be something else that's like, okay, thanks very much. It's raining here and it's getting really cold, and it's so enjoy yourself.
Fair.
Yeah, exactly. Rub it in, why don't you?
Okay, and John, you always have a lot of anecdotes.
I think the thing which I found the most amusing, only because I'm English and I live down here, is the fact that we were fundamentally someday shooting in two completely different countries. I mean, Monaco is a separate country and France is a separate country. And we got ourselves into a stage whereby, and it was quite complicated trying to explain this to everybody so they got the right times to be in the right country at the right time doing the right thing. But fundamentally, you could sleep in France and go out whenever you wanted to, but you signed a piece of paper, but it could only be for an hour. Or you could nip across the road because the hotel was right on the border with Monaco and actually go to a restaurant of which all were open in Monaco, but none were in France. And when we were shooting, we were not allowed to shoot after the curfew in Monaco, which was 8 o'clock. unless you were dispensated going to a restaurant, which was open until 10. So then what we would do is we could possibly have a meal break at 8, and then at 9 we'd slip into France and we carry on shooting, which actually saved us some money on our night rates. So all that I actually found amazingly amusing, and some people who, I won't say some people, a particular person did annoy me at one stage about something, so I gave them the wrong information about where to be at what time, and it was quite amusing to see the results of that.
Fantastic. Some great perspective to end this wonderful conference. Thank you, gentlemen. France is now skilled with a brand new 10% VFX bonus. John, is that a great opportunity to welcome more shooting in France during the next years?
Well, as you know, I'm actually using that bonus 10% on a show at the moment, which we were shooting in France at the beginning of the year.
I won't reveal secrets, sorry.
We actually had our last day of shooting on the 12th of March. The COVID world kicked in on Friday the 13th, which was our travel day back to Ireland. So the show got delayed. That bonus got voted in. We are now using the 2 million visual effects tax rebate at 40% here in France as opposed to 30, in order to get more value for our money. And also, it's not just about value for money, it's also because in France, there's actually the know-how, there's the techniques, there's the technical people, the equipment, the investment has been made here in France, both in terms of manpower and also the technology, to actually allow the visual effects to be done at a very, very high level, as good as anywhere else in the world, quite frankly. And actually turned our 30% rebate, which we had at the beginning of the year on our show, it has now suddenly become 40%. So we've really used that in the way it was designed to be used. And I'm currently budgeting 2 other shows, which are coming to France because of the 40% rebate, which is kicked off by the 10% bonus on visual effects, 2 million of eligible expend in visual effects. Yeah. So I think the future is looking good for everybody here.
Perfect. Wonderful phrases to conclude. I will give the floor to Stephan for the conclusion. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much to both of you for sharing your experience. It was really fascinating. So I think this was really interesting for our audience. And I will simply say to conclude the show that I hope to see a lot of people like Mike filming in France in the next months or years, and we'll be really happy to see you in France soon.